Some of you may be aware of the city of Dnipro. Especially with the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine, everyone has had their eyes set on this country that's always had bad relations with its massive neighbour. And while you may feel that talking about football shouldn't be priority at the moment, I think it's time to look back on a better time for many Ukrainians. 7 years ago, when the literal underdogs in Europe came so close to tasting success and the subsequent downward spiral the club would go into. This is how one of Ukraine's best disappeared. Welcome to the FC Dnipro story. The club was formed by the Petrovsky factory in 1918 and was called BRIC, standing for that. Being formed just as a war was starting wasn't great timing, and the club disbanded until after the First World War had settled down, coming back together in 1925. The club competed under the name Stal in the first Soviet competition for 3 seasons before once again another world war happened. After the final war, it re-entered the Soviet competition as well as merging with another club from Dnipro, that. And logically the club was called Metalla. From 1950 to 52 they were relegated for poor results and they reached the semi-finals of the Regional Cup, the USSR Cup, in 1954, losing to Spartak Yerevan. In 1973 and 76, the newly changed name of Dnipro reached the semi-finals of the USSR Cup once again, although they were relegated just 2 years later. Although they promoted back into the top flight 2 years later, they languished at the bottom of the table for a few years, but survival was ultimately achieved. A few years later, they employed some new coaches, Vladimir Yemet and Hennady Zizek, where they went on to win the Soviet Championship twice in 1983 and 1988. Once with each of the 2 coaches. 3 years after the second title win, the Soviet Union collapsed with Dnipro taking on the name of Dnipro, the name of the biggest river in Ukraine. In the newly formed Ukrainian Premier League, Dnipro were top contenders straight from the start, finishing as runners-up in only the league's 3rd season, as well as finishing 3rd in 1992, 95, 96, 2001 and 2004, while reaching the finals of the Domestic Cup in 95, 97 and 04, losing all 3 times to Shakhtar Donetsk. But now onto the part you're most likely aware of, the infamous 14-15 Europa League campaign. Come the end of the previous season, Dnipro had finished in 2nd, 6 points off champions Shakhtar, so they had to settle for a Champions League playoff spot. Well, in their first game when they were automatically put into the 3rd qualifying round, they were booted out of the competition by Copenhagen. Great start, so back into familiar territory in the Europa League, and they were put into a group with Inter, Saint Etienne and Karabag. Although they lost both of their games against Inter and barely scraped through the group, they got it done. That's all that matters in the end. In the knockouts, due to them not topping their group, they were forced into the round of 32 against the Champions League rejects, and Dnipro were put against Olympiacos. At home in the first leg they cruised to a 2-0 win before finishing their job in the second leg with a 2-2 draw in Greece. In the round of 16 their opponents were Ajax. In the first leg they came home 1-0 winners thanks to a Sazula winner. In Amsterdam, Ajax were winners in the 90 minutes, but due to the beautiful and now deceased away goals rule, a Conor Plianka goal in the 97th minute of extra time was enough to send the underdogs through to the last 8. Next up they were awarded a favourable draw in Club Bruges. In Belgium, it was a 0-0 result, but once again at home, they managed to grind out a result with an 82nd minute winner thanks to Yevhen Shakov, sending the Ukrainian outfit into the semis. This is their first ever time in a European semi-final. They'd only ever made it to the quarters on 2 separate occasions where they had lost. People were starting to take notice and actually consider this seemingly unknown team as possible winners. It's a story similar to that of the historic Wales team that reached the Euro 2016 semi-final. And I would love to do a video on that because these underdog stories are incredible and really fun to write. But anyways, back to Dnipro, and they were put against Napoli, a giant football club. In this historic tie in the first leg at Naples, Dnipro grabbed a late draw and a very nice away goal to boot from Yevhen Selesnov. And we all know what happened next. At home, Dnipro did the seemingly impossible. Thanks once again to a Selesnov goal, that settled the difference. Despite Napoli having the likes of a goal-scoring machine like Gonzalo Higuain, and other players like Insigne, Jose Callahan and Southampton legend Manolo Gabbiadini, they just couldn't get past the Dnipro backline, despite half the team seemingly getting booked. But they'd done it. Definitely up there with one of the biggest upsets in European football. And now they were up against the biggest of the big, the Europa League merchants themselves, Sevilla. Well, not anymore. Dnipro's first ever final in Europe, the biggest match that the club had ever played. And it started off so well. A dream start with Nikola Kalinic thumping a header to send their fans into hysterics. There was no way they could actually do it. Obviously, there was still over 80 minutes to play, but anything could happen. It's football after all. Then, 20 minutes later, Krajkoriak finished very well into the bottom corner from a great ball from Eva Banega to give Sevilla an equaliser. And then just 3 minutes later, Jose Reyes plays a defence-splitting pass to Carlos Bacca, who rounded the keeper to put them in front. It seemed it was falling apart, but just on the stroke of half-time, a quick Ruslan Rotan free kick on the edge of the box caught Sergio Rico sleeping to restore faith. What a first half. But on 73 minutes, another great pass through the defence saw Bacca thump in a second and claim the eventual winner. Dnipro had to settle for second place, and while they easily could have snatched it, I'm sure the fans who travelled to all the legs and games amidst all the troubles back home enjoy watching their team's best ever season take place right in front of them on one of the biggest stages in the world. And here I think it's best to say that Dnipro couldn't play any of their home legs in their actual stadium due to conflict in eastern Ukraine, and instead had to play 400 miles away from home in Kiev. Makes it even more impressive that their home records were so good. Most would never have guessed it, but this was their last ever European final, semi-final, heck, European campaign at all, as Dnipro were excluded by UEFA from competing in European competitions for the next 3 years for violating financial fair play regulations. The 16-17 season was a car crash to say the least. Debts were owed to staff and the coach, and Dnipro were prevented from signing new players other than free agents. In October 2016 they were deducted 6 points for the same reason. In April 2017, another 3 points were deducted, and at the end of the season, the club was relegated and fast-tracked into the third tier of Ukrainian football for the first time in their history. In the next season, they were doing pretty well before they were deducted more points, totaling up to 18, which resulted in the club finishing in 8th. In June 2018, FIFA decided to relegate them again to the amateur leagues for the next season, which they played for 1 season. In the 1920 season, they did an Aubameyang and just didn't turn up for the season, which ultimately would have been their last. Most players and coaching and managing staff jumped ships this season to join FC Dnipro 1. The whole of FC Dnipro staff was appointed for the Dnipro 1's under-21 team. It seemed as if UEFA just completely wanted to forget about Dnipro as they dismissed claims to recognise SC Dnipro as a successor of FC Dnipro, which it kind of was. And this is the end of the Dnipro story, but I guess we can talk about this other team for a quick minute. It seems they've inherited Dnipro's spot in 3rd place behind Dynamo Kiev and Shakhtar Donetsk, and are generally doing well after finishing in a lonely 7th last season. They are spearheaded by Ukrainian striker Artem Dovbyk, probably most well known for his last-minute equaliser in the Euros, and he has 14 goals in just 18 games this season and looking in the face of that golden boot. But I'm looking forward to next season because I really want to see the Dnipro name back in the Europa League where they belong, even if it isn't the exact same team. But that is only if it gets underway again. Russia are not looking like they're going to be leaving Ukraine anytime soon, and all everyone is doing is praying for those stuck in cities across the country and hoping it will all be okay. Especially after Yarmolenko's goal against Aston Villa and Sevilla last week, it just showed how much this has affected everyone, including the people who are safe in a country thousands of miles from the war zone. And with that, thank you very much for watching. Show some support if you like this new style, and of course, prayers to Ukraine.